Welcome to Blue Collar Reformation. Today we're going to be talking about the doctrine of the church. This is part one in a series about the doctrine of the church and really coming out of all the other things we've talked about. This is one of the central nervous system things of this channel where you're basically going to see that everything falls apart when the church falls apart. The doctrine of the church has fallen on hard times, and there are a lot of different reasons for this. Partially, it's because of our wider culture, but also it's because church officers and the church hasn't been doing what the church is supposed to do in the western part of the world, especially in the United States, and especially where I live in the western part of the United States. Rugged individualism has really led to a democratization of Christianity. And what I mean by democratization is that basically people think that it is by democratic choice that they become part of Christianity. Now, there is a point where you believe, you've decided to join the church, but at the same time, we have to realize that this is a covenant where God has placed his name upon his people, that he has chosen a people out of the world by his sovereign hand and mighty arm. And we also know that God places his sacraments upon us, and these are words and actions by the church where God covenants people upon their profession of faith. So there is a conversion that happens on behalf of the individual, but it is initiated by the sovereign hand of God, and then it is established, and when God's covenant is established with us visibly as members of the church by way of baptism and then being admitted to the supper upon profession of faith. So it's the action of God to place his name upon you in the visible church. But this has fallen on hard times simply because people want church for people who don't like church. And you have all kinds of iterations of this. And basically what happened in the western part of the United States with the rise of the seeker-sensitive movement was that first off, people were going to large churches that were being established that had all kinds of programs that were enticing to individuals, but also which were exactly tailored to their specific demographic. And so that was the felt needs, but really it was a consumerist mindset model of church planting. The second step to that was in the early 2000s, where instead of just meeting felt needs, the churches, the mega churches, having gutted the smaller churches and basically obliterated them from existing here in California and other places in the western part of the United States, what ended up happening next is they started to basically compete with one another, and the way that they would essentially find people to go to their churches was to have big spectacles. So they would have big events. They'd bring in big speakers, and notoriety would basically bring people in to go and attend those churches, and then they would attend as often as they would attend. So you have mega churches with not just the felt needs movement, but also a spectacle. The reason they would do this is in order to bring people in, and then they would give them the gospel, and that was a good thing. They would give them the gospel. But the way that it was done basically led to a consumerist mindset, an individualist mindset, a selfish mindset, which has now led to many people who are bemused by that, offended by it, intellectually offended by it, that they basically have left those churches and now are in sort of the no man's land of what do I do? Where do I go? I can't even hardly find a small and faithful church where I can be part of the body because there aren't hardly any small and faithful churches around anymore. All you have is these mega churches. And if you found a Reformed church, you probably found that it's fairly small because the temptation to go to where you're going to get milk and maybe a little bit of white bread for your theology is tempting enough because they're going to give you some things that are very useful for an organization of life and a place to go and programs for kids and that sort of thing. But it's short-sighted because the megachurch model has basically shown a degrade and a decline of Christianity against the population since it began. And I think a major reason for this is because they're not thinking covenantally in evangelizing their children. Their children are not being brought up in the faith, and so the megachurches are hemorrhaging young people out of the churches. And so this was short-sighted, and it's led to a lack of attendance, and along with it has also risen up another thing that makes serious-minded Christian men not want to attend those churches, and that's the fact that these churches also tend to be female-dominated. And not just people on staff, but also just the femininity of the religious practice. And this is something that makes serious-minded Christian men say, well, I don't want to go there. I don't want to be part of that. It's been feminized. It's not real biblical Christianity. Where's the Apostle Paul's? Where's the actual real leadership? Spiritual leadership, authoritative leadership from the scripture that I would like to follow along with. Where's the man I would like to follow? And that sort of thing. Now, what we see along with this, though, is that people will then go and try and find something that has some authenticity, has some authority. And so the other side of it is sort of a pendulum where you swing from one side of the megachurch and rugged individualism over to sort of an authority and authoritarianism of, say, the Roman Catholic Church. See, it's old, it's ancient, it has authority, it has a very authoritarian structure. The church itself is basically defined as the church. The actual institution of the Roman Catholic Church is the church. It's very public and really denying the invisible church in all of its practice and doctrines in the modern age, since the time of the late Middle Ages and into the time of the Reformation and today. And so individualism has given way to a pendulum swing that led to authoritarianism within religion. And what we need to find is that the end is not in either of these, not in total independence and not in total authoritarianism, but in the Reformation, which blends these together because God has a covenant. So understanding the covenant. So go back through the subject of the covenant. There's a playlist on the covenant on this channel. And then you can also go through the Doctrine of Vocation series that will explain where we're going here. But now with the doctrine of the church, we have to realize the problem we're in. The church has declined against the population because of unfaithfulness. The population continues to be undiscipled and untaught. We have a new mission field again, where we have to redisciple and re-evangelize this region. The same arguments need to be made, but they need to be made in new ways, to new situations, to new philosophies that have come up. And the church needs to be doing this as a unit. So if you need to find a church, look up Reformed Church or look up Confessional Presbyterian Church, look up Biblical Presbyterian Church. Those sorts of things will actually land you probably in a fairly sturdy Reformed tradition. There's going to be very few people there. It will be maybe between 30 to 100 members. That's the typical Reformed church because that's a typical small church. But also, typically, they are healthier because they're doing the ministry that the Scriptures tells us to do. Now, not everybody is as gifted as everybody. You'll find some large Reformed churches where they've specifically called very gifted men in order to serve in the pulpits of those churches. In other churches, you're going to find very effective leaders in the elders and deacons. But what you got to realize is that basically with the doctrine of the church, you need to be part of a real and serious biblical church. This is PBR signing off. Thank you for watching Blue Collar Reformation. We are here to equip you with wisdom of the Word. The aim is to apply the system of doctrine taught in Scripture to every square inch of faith in life. We are on Twitter and Substack for your sake. Links are in the description. Share with your recalcitrant and reprobate friends and family freely. Blue Collar Reformation is a lightweight and mobile outreach platform. Take it in hand and enter the fray. Godspeed.